Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. My name is Musenga Katongo, and I'll be the host for today's webinar, which is a Leading Ladies live recap with none other than Chilufya Chileshe Kapwepwe, who is our leading lady, especially for episode 5 of Leading Ladies. So right about now, I'm not going to take too much of your time. I think I'll go straight into it as we have our guest. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Sengi. How are you?
I'm great. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Oh, great. So I think we'll dive right into it and we'll get straight into it. So just a couple of ground rules. If you're watching on Facebook, feel free to comment as well as to just share whatever comments or questions you may have. And if you're also joining us in the chat here, you can drop your questions here as well. So the first question I have for you, Madam Chilufya, is how does it feel like to be a leading lady?
I'm not really a leading lady. To me, I feel I'm just a Zambian who is participating and contributing to the development of this country or to the deforestation that is going in this country. That at least if I can contribute, then I feel I have a purpose in life. I think that is the way I feel, that just a contribution which is important for me.
All right, great. I love to hear that. It's always amazing to know that it's purpose that's driving the decisions that are being made, especially in such spaces. So I think I would love my first question to be, especially because this is all about diving deeper into your story from the Leading Ladies episode. I would love to know what was it like being a child of the great Simon Mwasakapwepe. He's a renowned leader in Zambian history, and he's a name that we can't leave out of the conversations of Zambian history. So, what was it like being a child of this particular man, and just how was your childhood like?
He was a very, very strict father, and he very, very traditional person, so that sometimes we felt that he was too harsh. I think we've only seen the results and the benefits of him being very, very strict with us. As girls, there are 4 of us in the family. Were meant, although we had even servants in the house, he insisted on us doing the work. Childhood was tough because starting from ANC, my father never had a salary. What we used to see is that from the ANC office, there would be a wheelbarrow, which will come with a bag of meal, cooking oil, carpenter, and cabbage. Basically, that was our diet. So really, it was hard. We saw friends at Christmas celebrating, buying new clothes, because that was the in thing. People celebrated at Christmas. They had new clothes. They ate rice and chicken. And we didn't have that. And we always complained to Dad, but when are we ever going to enjoy like everybody else? And he kept saying, when we get independence, when we get independence. Until I was 13 years old, that is when we saw this independence. And sure enough, what he had been promised, happened. So really, it was a tough childhood, but because he was encouraging us, he kept telling us there's a reason why I'm fighting this battle. And you are going to see the results when we get independence. So that it was a very nice childhood. In the evening, we'll sit and sing church hymns because our father was a reverend. Our father was a reverend. So, it was a family thing where we sat down, we joked, we laughed, and Dad was always teaching you something. You never had a conversation. You always had a message, for you. So to me, it was a very wonderful childhood, although it was tough. It was tough.
All right, thank you so much for that. I can only imagine what it must have been like to be in that kind of space. But I'm so glad that you can really see the fruits of it all. So continuing with the story of your childhood, especially with what we learned about you in the Leading Ladies episode. Could you kindly let us know what was it like, or what was a day in the life of a young Chilufya Chileshe Kapwepwe who was learning about conservation farming from her grandmothers. What was that like? You know, the everyday life and all.
Okay. What happened is that Dad used to encourage us that we had to go back to our base. So what he used to do, school holidays, he would send us back to the village to go and live with our grandmothers, maternal and. But I decided I wanted to go to school, and he agreed with me. He was very happy. So I went to live with my maternal grandmother. Then we used to have something like sub A, sub B. So I was doing standard 2 and standard 3 at Nkula Primary School. These were schools which we called weekly schools because you went to school on Sunday with all your provision, you know, bill meal and everything, and stayed for a week and then came back on Friday back home. So then I would go with my grandmother, you know, doing the farming. What I noticed, which I realized now was conservation farming, was the way she grew her crops. For example, in the first year in that field, you would have cassava, and in that same ridge, you would also plant beans. At both ends of the ridges, you would plant sweet potatoes. So you have 3 different foods in this one ridge. But it was the nutrients that these crops like beans would give to the soil while the cassava is growing. And at the same time, you also harvest sweet potatoes from this same ridge. And June, then we'll start making these ridges more or less like getting all the grass that has been growing, covering the grass with soil, so that when it comes near the planting season, then you start now, you know, removing these ridges and making them, flattening them out, and you find that all the grass was rotten and you had fertile soil. In a field, she would, for example, plant millet. We never used to eat maize those days. Maize was for ngonis. Us, it was millet and cassava. So in that field, you would have the millet, the cassava, the indigenous seed of maize, which was just, it was for green maize consumption. So that was planted in that field of millet. The same field, you also had pumpkins. So we had pumpkins there, you had pumpkin leaves. So in terms of food, you'd have one field which you would have so many crops, but at the same time giving nutrients, because she would alternate the following year, that field, she would now plant groundnuts where you had millet the year before. She would do groundnuts. The third year, she would now plant cassava in that same field. So then, you know, now that's when I realized that she was actually enriching the soil with the different and various crops that she was using in that one field. Now we call it conservation farming, but to us, to her, it was a way of farming. It was a normal way of farming. And I came to, you know, to appreciate the land. I came to appreciate water, because going to get water from the river was quite a distance, but also owning land and having a land where you can cultivate all your food. Your whole life depended on land. And that gave me the love, you know, for land. It's something that up to now, I really appreciate. And I love land. It's like it nurtures you. It's your mother. It is very, very important, you know, to look after it. Yes, yes.
Oh wow, very loud and clear. So glad that you could also have that experience, especially at an early age. And I think moving forward, especially within the context of your story, there's an aspect in which you studied public health, you did advanced nursing, you even worked as a nurse and worked in the health sector, but then you decided to enter politics. So what influenced that decision for you to now leave the health sector and then now start a journey in the political space?
I had been a frustrated Zambian. I never voted. Although I turned 21, I was working as a nurse. In the one-party states, I didn't feel that I had a choice. I saw what my father had gone through in terms of politics. The imprisonment, the torture, being beaten, simply for expressing a different opinion or wanting to create a political party which had maybe different policies where he felt that this is not the right direction, because to him, he felt that agriculture was paramount. That let's forget about copper. To him, he wanted agriculture to be the in thing that would develop this country, because the agriculture would develop industries. So to me, I listened to him, and I was a very frustrated person. So when the MMD, came into being, and all of us got excited, who felt, I think this is now the period now for us to get involved in politics. I thought, yes, this is my opportunity. And I started campaigning. I remember going with Manawasa in Southern Province. I came and campaigned in Sali. I went and campaigned in Lonte right up to Kaputa. I stood in Lonte as a member of parliament. It was very, very exciting for me now in politics that I could see people should have different views. People should be accepted and tolerated for what they believe in. For diverse views, that is something very, very important. And for the first time, I felt free, that now I could express myself, and you could criticize the government. And I remember I was a backbencher. So to me, I normally used to get in trouble for criticizing my own party and my own government, because I felt I'm not a minister, I'm not part of government, I'm a backbencher, and that it's my duty, to correct my government when they are going wrong. So at times I was not very popular in parliament. Sometimes I used to be told, cross the floor, go to your NIP, But it was a lovely experience. It was a nice experience, and I enjoyed expressing myself for the first time in my life. So that is how I got into politics. Although my mother was very much against me going, she said she has seen enough from my father. She didn't want any member of the family to get into politics, but I, overruled, and I went in. And from there, then I was sent into diplomatic service. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So glad that, and I always keep saying so glad. I'm happy that you did get the opportunity to express yourself and be a member of parliament, and even really express yourself in that regard in the political space. So now, if we proceed with the story, so we've learned all about how your childhood was under Simon Kapwepwe. We've learned about how exactly you learned from your grandmothers about conservation farming and your political career. So now there's a point where you formed Imiti Kula Mpanga Environmental and Development Organization, which was meant to sensitize communities around things to do with deforestation and and things to do with environmental conservation. So I would love to find out, since you formed the organization and with all the work that you've been putting in, how would you describe the state of deforestation in Zambia? Like, has it improved? Are we still going backward? Is there any change? What would you say?
I don't see any change at all. I came in 2007 from my diplomatic service, and I was so shocked to find that starting from Umpika right up to Nakonde, the level of deforestation was so bad, and that is what inspired me to start Mitikula Impanga. And it was most unfortunate that, to me, I felt that I did not get the support that I needed from government. I remember going to see almost every minister that was appointed as Minister of Environment, and I went with pictures of the deforestation in the area from Nakonde. I interviewed the people that were involved in charcoal trade, and they were saying, give us an alternative means of livelihood. We'll stop the charcoal, and because it's a hard job. So I've gone around, even now, the deforestation continues, and at a very fast rate, because now we are even getting more people getting into charcoal trade. we tried out one method, which I felt government really should have taken up, that we do not target the Zambians who are creating the deforestation by charcoal trade. We target the traders, the international traders, the Tanzanians who are going through the trucks and getting loads and loads of charcoal. And they sell that at a very cheap price. They buy at a very cheap price from the Zambians. But when you follow that charcoal to Dar es Salaam, you follow it, you find, even in Kenya, Zambian charcoal goes there and it's very expensive. Our people are selling it at 30 kwacha along this road. And they are not rich. They are still poor for them. I've been going to see them. They're still at the same rate where they're living in a little hut. So really, the level of poverty continues. Our people's health is affected. And if you stand in Nakonde and look across, you see the mansions that people have been able to build because of our charcoal. And on the Zambian side, there's nothing. And they have laws which are enforced. You see, we made a mistake of removing what we call Kapenda Mavola, forest guards. As a child growing up in Chileshe, we used to go with mom in the forest and we find the game guards, the Kapenda Mavola. They were enforcing the law. We changed and said we need graduates to be in the offices. So the Kapenda Mavola were removed from that forest. And nobody felt that that forest belonged to anybody now. So they abandoned their forest and anybody could access. And yet in Tanzania, the laws are very, very strict. You cannot be found cutting a tree, you'll be jailed. So the law enforcement is lacking in our country and it continues to be lacking. We are still not doing anything. We are still politicizing this thing that if we do this, our people are not going to vote for us. Let's not target our people. Let's target the traders who are getting rich. And the experience I had was we were as Mitikula doing during the day. I have a group of forest department, the police, and the Mitikula. The whole day will be confiscating charcoal. During the night, I'll be there, and we confiscated bags and bags and created a shortage in Tanzania. It was very effective. And I was telling the charcoal burners, they said, as long as we don't have a market, we'll stop burning the charcoal trade. So really, we can do it if we target the people that are creating this problem of deforestation in our country. So the level, to me, the level is still very high and it continues. It's still going up. It's still going up.
Interesting. That's a very interesting insight. So now, given that particular perspective and that information that you've shared with us, then what would you say are the milestones, the achievements that your organization have at least managed to get, so that you can at least curb some of the evils which are coming up because of deforestation and the like?
Okay. The same way that the communities were saying, we are prepared to stop charcoal trade as long as you give us an alternative. So the alternative that we did, we managed to get funding from Finland. We were able to buy seeds, groundnuts, beans, cassava, sorghum, crops that do not require fertilizer, crops that they are drought resistant, like cassava, sorghum. So those are the crops. What we are doing to the communities, if I give you 5 kg of groundnuts, you grow that, the following year, you pay me back 10 kg. Then I'm able to continue with another group. So this is what we are doing. And once people are empowered, they could see that the fertilizer they are talking about, that we need fertilizer. You don't need fertilizer for beans, for groundnuts. The price of beans and groundnuts, it's 800 kwacha for a 50 kg bag. Maize is 100 kwacha or 200. So they were able to make a living or to get an income from trading in these crops. And the only input was seed. No fertilizer was required. So we found that empowering people with seeds was workable, and it was working. Secondly, we went in schools. We started talking about climate change. We're talking about tree planting, and along the road from Luanya village right up to Isoka, we managed to get schools to start doing tree planting and talk about conservation and also production. We could give them seed and the school would produce soybeans, for example. So that empowering communities, empowering schools, being made also honorary game rangers by the Ministry of Environment, finally they recognized us, gave us that status of knowing that we are doing something for this country. We are, participating. And we really felt empowered as well. So to me, it has really given me so much satisfaction in knowing that I've contributed to the communities that are able now to grow these crops that we're talking about. I've been able to get children to be sensitive about the environment and what they should be doing. We have also influenced children by saying, go to your parents to start a plantation for you. If your parents has land, let them start planting 1,000 trees per year in a hectare of pine, for example. By the time that child is going to university, that plantation will pay for that child's education. So those are some of the things that I look at and where people have started plantations, even the ones which we have 6 plantations between Chinsali and Isoka, where China State Construction Company have been constructing the road. And we've been able to influence the villagers between Chinsali and Isoka to start plantations. So we have 6 plantations, ongoing. It's now 2 years and the trees are also growing. So those are the kind of things that I look at. And I was able to also influence students from other countries because I think they Googled, found about Tikula, and they decided also to come and learn what it is that we're doing. So you find that internationally, locally, the impact, is felt because people still come and say, like, for example, beans. They'll say, we are looking for Chilufya Kapwepwe. That's what they call the beans now, because a lot of people now use it. And it was recommended to me by Minister of Agriculture because it produces a lot of beans. So that, impact of people saying, yes, we appreciate this, we want to use this seed because we've seen that, it can give us money. So those are some of the milestones where I feel that I've contributed a little bit to, to the well-being of this country and the development of this country in terms of conservation and empowering communities. Yeah.
I wouldn't even say that you've contributed a little bit. I think that's a lot. I think that's really a lot. So I think that sounds amazing. And in fact, just to pick up what you talked about, the students that you hosted, I believe you had hosted students from Europe as well as from Japan, and you even got the opportunity to speak about deforestation and environmental conservation on TEDx Japan. What was that experience like?
It was really first to talk to these students when they came. They couldn't believe that we have forests because they were saying we're coming from Japan. They are not forests. They were born in town, a 20-story building, and they experience for them to come and look at this forest, even around this house where I am. There are trees around here. It was so exciting. It was so overwhelming for them to see this. And they invited me to say, we want you to come and talk to a larger audience. The university in Japan that I went to, they have students from every continent, And when I told them about the problems that we have, they came out with bigger problems from their countries because now they were talking about, Ms. Kapwepwe, how do we address the problem of pollution in our country, for example, because these are major problems where we are coming from and government is not listening. Ms. Kapwepwe, how do we do it? How do we influence government? So you could see the enthusiasm in these students and how they were inspired to say, we won't go back to our various countries and say, how do we address the issue of environment, the issue of land degradation, the information, of climate change. So it was such a wonderful experience that I was able to influence young people's minds, trying to look at solutions with them and see what it is that they can do in the country. Do we form organizations when we get back home? How do we do it? And I started corresponding with these young people, trying to say, no, I think in this case, you can do this, you can even go into politics, become a member of parliament, you can influence government. So these are the kind of advice, I've been giving them, or, some of them have continued corresponding with me. So really, TED experience, I found that the audience that I had, I was able to reach out internationally, to all these students who are hungry for knowledge about how they can contribute in our own respective countries. It was a wonderful experience. Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I think I'd also love to find out, what was your experience working with so many different people? I mean, you've worked with local communities, you've worked with international organizations, you've worked with local chiefs. What would you say was your biggest lesson working with these different people around the issue of environmental conservation?
The traditional leaders, the chiefs, those that I was able to influence. You have different chiefs. There are those who are effective, others who are not effective at all and are not interested in what you are discussing. But the ones that were really listening and were interested in the project, like the late Chief Luchembe, he went to the extent of calling all his 12 village headmen and said, I want you to start a project with Ms. Kapwepwe in every village. Unfortunately, he died here. He was in a car accident and he passed on. It was very, very sad. So with the traditional leaders, you find in some areas, I was able to influence the traditional leader, and they started project in their village. I was able to give them the inputs, for example, like the seeds I was talking about, of the crops where they don't need to use fertilizer. So it had a lot of impact on some of the traditional leaders who are still saying, we are still interested in, and we still want you to continue working with us. Schools, children are very, very enthusiastic. Before we used to have clubs, Chongololo clubs, and those like died a natural death. So we had children, and especially where we had teachers who had the interest, we were able to influence the teachers to actually get the children to start planting trees around the schools and around their homes. This also had an impact on education, for the children to have that kind of exposure and to also learn about climate change. With the communities, it was this change, the shift in thinking that they could not survive without fertilizer, that they needed fertilizer to survive as communities. So that satisfaction of seeing them grow the beans. There was one time we produced 300 bags and we got to World Food Program. They came as an organization to come and buy from us. So you could see the excitement in the communities of actually now they paid us and I started now giving the money. Those who had brought 50 bags, those who had brought 10 bags, the excitement of people saying, I said, you can make more money from these crops than maize. And that satisfaction of seeing, yes, this is what I've done, this is what I've contributed to these communities. It is wonderful. You feel fulfilled to work with communities and they respond to you, because to me, I found that communities, it is the leadership that is lacking. Members of parliament, if they are serious, you could develop your constituents, especially now that they've a lot of money with the constituents fund, agriculture. Run with that constituents fund, start projects with cassava, for example, which is very cheap to grow. It's a drought resistance. You can, when I was a diplomat in China, cassava is used, you can make glue, you can make writing paper, you can make sealing boards, you can use it as a base, pharmaceutical companies, you can eat it. So really, and in this country, 9 provinces, cassava is indigenous. So you can start projects even as a member of parliament. And this is what I keep saying, communities are easy to develop using agriculture. And this is what we need to do in order to develop this country. For us to industrialize this country. And this is what I learned internationally from the other people that I worked with. Finland, for example, sent me to Finland to say, go and see what we mean when we talk about forest management. You have families who do nothing else, but they have plantations. People send their children to universities through plantations. So that really working with these various organizations, international communities, I had the exposure to see, yes, if they are able to do this, we can also do it in Zambia. With the communities, yes, you are able to influence communities. And once you give them leadership, they'll follow. Once they see the results, that you are not cheating them, because that is what the communities keep saying. We get MPs, they come and tell us they will do this for you. Once you vote them, they go for 5 years. So the leadership is lacking. Communities can develop as long as we leadership, as long as we can show them the cheapest way that they can grow these crops, the cheapest way that they can create industries. And this is, to me, working with the various organizations, institutions, international organizations, and the fact that I had international organizations that funded us. Even we had TICVA from the United States. They came and they said, no, we are funding this institution. So the program is able to go on because you are able to work with all these various stakeholders who recognize what you are doing, who recognize how important the work is, for the various communities, especially rural communities who don't have a lot of opportunities in order to address their livelihoods. So really, to me, the experience that I had working with all these various stakeholders has enriched my life. And I think when I die, I'll die a happy person.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think I really appreciate everything that you've really had to share with us. So I think in conclusion, I would really love to get your 2 cents on what advice you would share with the young environmental conservationists who would want to come up and perhaps do similar work as you. Even in that same life, what would you tell your younger self with regards to just coming up as an environmental conservationist?
If I could go back, just maybe 40 years back, because now I'm 70. So really, I keep saying, I wish I had time, more time to engage myself in more projects dealing with communities. One other way, I believe I should not have left politics, because politics, you can influence change. You don't necessarily have to agree with what they're doing. You can concentrate on your constituents and still continue politics, but at least you'll be able to influence what laws you are passing in parliament. So I feel that if I could go back, the younger Chilufya would be one really seriously involved in politics, but only use politics to develop my constituency. Only use politics to influence change and look at the laws that are creating, that are not being enforced. How do we enforce these laws so that we can actually manage these forests? We can actually stop people from destroying the environment, that we can give alternative means of livelihood to more people. Yes, I've addressed that, but it's on a small scale. If I could go back, I think I would involve more communities in my project, that I would want to influence government more, that simply the donor community, who helped me. But really, to me, there has to be a change in government's attitude in the way they are going to address this issue. So I'm not in an influential position, unfortunately. If I was, that is one thing to me, I would make sure that let's look at how we can address the issue, seriously. We are not addressing the issue of climate change, of deforestation, seriously, and we need to do that. So the younger Chilufya would have been a vibrant politician, but at the same time trying to develop, my communities. To me, that is the way I look at it. Yeah.
And what advice would you have for upcoming environmental conservation?
Okay. For the younger generation, yes, I know there's a lot of tree planting. People are always talking about, let's say, sensitize people. Let's talk about it, stop deforestation, stop cutting trees. You need to link food to deforestation. You need to link food to climate change. Anything that you are going to talk about to communities, people have to see that, yes, we are not going to do this because we are able to get an income or we are able to eat. As long as it's not linked to their livelihood, if you are simply just telling them stop, or we've come to sensitize you, and I've seen a lot of this coming, people get a lot of money from donor communities, they come in here, we've come to sensitize people. The communities are tired. They know that this is wrong. We are cutting trees, it is wrong. So it is not the message that the message is, how do they survive? How do you give them food on the table? How do they educate their children? How do they, if you talk about planting trees, let them do a plantation in their land, on their soil. Help them to get land so that they can create plantations. If this country had continued for the last 50 years, what the Kaunda government was doing, we had plantations in every district. They were abandoned. I've gone through those plantations, government plantations, fires have gone through, totally destroyed. Now, if we had a plantation per district in this country for the past 50 years, this would have been a timber producing country. We would not be importing logs from South Africa. So if we cannot do it at government level, let's encourage, as upcoming young people who want to go into environment, encourage people to go into plantations. And that is what I'm doing right now, because that is an investment for their children for the next 15 years. They'll be able to send their children to university. So for the upcoming people, try and look at communities, how they can address the poverty levels, how they can address food security, how they can address the deforestation that is happening in this country by linking it to a means of livelihood. Then they will listen. And the younger generation are going to find that, yes, their NGOs will succeed. And you can influence government because they can see that industries are being created in communities from the work that you are doing as an NGO. So please, consultation is free of charge. The upcoming young people that I want to go, you come home, you come and eat the cassavas and the beans that I'm talking about, and we can go forward. I've done my part. We need the younger generation to take over from me and continue with this work.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think that's a really powerful message for us young people as well. I think I would also just love to just say thank you so much for your time and for really gracing us with your presence, as well as just teaching us all you have experienced and even just letting us dive deeper into your story. For that, I would just have to say thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving me the time, to talk to our fellow Zambians. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Bye.
Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
Otherwise, that was our webinar with Chilufya Chileshe Kapwepwe, who happens to be our leading lady for our latest episode of Leading Ladies. So if you'd like to listen to her episode, you can always check it out on our YouTube channel. You can equally just check it out on our Facebook page, on our Instagram page, as well as Twitter and LinkedIn. And you can stay tuned for another episode which will be coming out this Wednesday, which will be coming straight to you. And we are looking forward to having another webinar so that we can discuss and dive deeper into that story. Otherwise, for me, Musangi Katongo, I'll just have to say thank you for joining us, and I really hope that you learned a thing or two from this webinar. See you next time.